Imagine this: the United States and Canada, two nations with a long history of cooperation, suddenly find themselves at odds. For years, their trade partnership was steady and mutually beneficial. But then, President Trump accused Canada of playing unfairly and ignited a trade conflict. Friendly negotiations quickly soured, with tariffs becoming his go-to tactic. He imposed fresh taxes on Canadian imports, grabbing headlines and rattling officials in Ottawa. Canada, America's closest ally and top trading partner, was caught off guard. Trump's message was unmistakable. He felt the U.S. was being exploited and demanded tougher agreements. The Canadian tariffs were just one piece of a broader effort to overhaul global trade. Suddenly, certainty vanished. Businesses on both sides of the border were thrown into disarray. International trade relies on predictable rules, but now a single tweet could send markets into a tailspin. These sudden tariff threats weren't just bargaining chips. They were a bold statement. Decades of trust and partnership were thrown into uncertainty overnight. The once friendly border now felt like a front line in an economic battle. Canadian leaders scrambled to make sense of the new landscape. The shock waves spread through factories, government offices, and living rooms alike. America's allies began to question whether they could still rely on the U.S. The world watched as a once solid alliance began to crack before their eyes. The issue was no longer about neighborly chores. It was about whether the neighborhood itself could survive the rift. The opening act of a trade war had begun, with consequences that would reach far beyond North America. So, what's a tariff? Simply put, it's a tax on imported goods. If the U.S. puts a tariff on Canadian steel, that steel gets more expensive for American buyers. The idea is to make foreign products less attractive, boosting domestic industries. Trump saw tariffs as a powerful tool, a way to force countries to the bargaining table. His logic: make it painful to sell in the U.S., and others will cave to American demands. He used this tactic not just on Canada, but on China, Mexico, and Europe. This is economic protectionism, building a wall around your economy to shield local businesses. For example, a 25% tariff on foreign steel was meant to revive U.S. steel mills and bring jobs back. But tariffs are blunt instruments. They don't just hit the target country, they create ripple effects everywhere. While meant to protect one industry, they can disrupt many others. It's like throwing a rock in a pond. The splash is local, but the ripples spread far. Both the U.S. and Canada were about to feel those waves. The consequences of tariffs are rarely simple or contained. In a global economy, every action has a reaction. When the U.S. imposed tariffs, Canada felt the pain instantly. The auto industry, deeply linked to the U.S., was hit hard. Car parts crossed the border multiple times. Tariffs made this costly and complicated. Canadian car exports to the U.S. plummeted. Steel and aluminum industries suffered too. American buyers looked elsewhere, demand dropped, and jobs were lost. For Canada, whose biggest customer is the U.S., this was an economic crisis. The numbers were grim. Exports fell, trade deficits soared. The trade war exposed Canada's vulnerability. Too much reliance on one partner. A sudden rule change from the U.S. threw the entire economy into turmoil. The Canadian government called it a crisis. And it was. Businesses struggled, workers lost jobs, and uncertainty spread. The tariffs weren't just policy, they were real pain for families. The stable relationship was gone, replaced by an economic wall. Canada realized it needed to rethink its strategy. The lesson: putting all your eggs in one basket is risky. The trade war forced Canada to confront its dependence. The cold shadow of tariffs changed everything. Here's the catch: tariffs aren't paid by foreign countries, but by American importers. When costs go up, companies pass them to consumers. So, while aimed at Canada, tariffs meant higher prices for American families. Steel and aluminum tariffs made cars, appliances, and even beer cans more expensive. Automakers faced higher costs and raised prices. Even toys got pricier as tariffs threatened global supply chains. These small increases added up, acting as a stealth tax on consumers. The U.S. government collected tariff revenue, but at a cost to businesses and families. Major companies warned that trade wars hurt their bottom line. Global supply chains were disrupted. making products less affordable. The goal was to protect American jobs, but the reality was higher prices and uncertainty. The trade war boomeranged, hitting American wallets. Starting a trade war proved far more complicated than winning one. The pain was felt on both sides of the border. Economic battles rarely have clear winners. Faced with an unpredictable US, Canada decided it was time to diversify. The shock of tariffs forced a major rethink of Canada's economic strategy. For generations, trade with the US was Canada's foundation, but now, that foundation was cracking. Canada began seeking new markets, aggressively pursuing trade deals with Asia and Europe. The message: if the US makes business difficult, Canada will find new partners. The trade war taught Canada that dependency is dangerous. Political winds in the US can shift fast, threatening decades of cooperation. To protect itself, Canada started building a more balanced portfolio of trading partners. The trade war was painful, but it sparked a push for resilience and independence. While the US built walls, Canada built bridges. The result, a more globally minded, less dependent Canada. While the US and Canada fought, Europe saw an opening. Global companies seeking stability chose Europe over North America for new investments. The biggest prize: electric vehicle battery factories, the future of the auto industry. Trade chaos in North America made investors nervous. Europe, offering incentives and a stable, tariff-free market, attracted $20 billion in battery investments. These factories could have gone to the US or Canada, but uncertainty drove them away. Europe quietly became a leader in green technology. The trade war's unintended consequence, chasing away the very investments North America needed. Canada lost out too, caught in the crossfire. Europe's calm approach paid off, turning others' chaos into its own opportunity. In a globalized world, capital flows where it feels safest. The battery bonanza was Europe's reward for staying out of the fight. Imagine building a Lego castle, but the pieces keep moving, and the instructions change constantly. That's what tariffs did to global supply chains. A supply chain is the journey from raw material to finished product, often crossing many borders. Tariffs threw this system into chaos. Costs changed overnight, making planning impossible. Companies delayed investments, froze hiring, and scrambled to find new suppliers. Rebuilding supply chains is slow and expensive. The result: inefficiency, higher costs, and uncertainty for everyone. Businesses, workers, and consumers all paid the price. The promise of the trade war was strength, but the reality was confusion. The global economy is a web. Pull one thread too hard, and the whole thing tangles. The chaos showed how deeply interconnected the world has become. Disruption in one place ripples everywhere. Trade wars create knots that are hard to untangle. What's the big lesson? In today's world, trade wars rarely produce winners. Tariffs hurt Canada, but they also hurt American consumers and businesses. Both sides ended up bruised, with trust damaged. Meanwhile, Europe seized the chance to attract investment and technology. The trade war didn't just shift a few shipments, it changed the flow of global capital. The fallout lingered, with Canada diversifying and the US losing its closest allies' trust. Even if tariffs disappear, the world has changed. Aggressive tactics create uncertainty and lasting consequences. Global trade is a web of shared interests, not a simple game of winners and losers. Tear at that web, and you risk getting tangled, while others walk away with the prize. The real cost of a trade war is often paid by everyone.